public or private studies, scientific studies that are done by various groups.
So the process of review is very ad hoc, and fitting with the ad hocracy. There are some things that come out and are published without review. Critical documents, like for example the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, for example, was going through probably the most intensive review you would ever see. But what is happening is now, and I like this trend a lot of the science that's being done, they're coming now to the Delta Science Program, and they say, will you handle the peer review of this work? And this is a very effective method, and they're getting good at it. They can turn it around pretty quickly. This is a very positive trend. But when you look at the overall body of the gray literature that comes out, in particular, which is not peer-reviewed literature, we still have a culture of not enough.
So if the XYZ organization comes out with a scientific study, as a member of the public or a journalist, we would ask, has that been peer-reviewed by who and da-da-da?
Correct. You should do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions?
Questions?
John O'Lee.
John O'Lee Henderson with Henderson Farms. And I was wondering, from the scientific community, what are the main foundational pieces of science that should be guiding the Delta Plan or should be guiding the BDCP?
No, this is easy. Actually, it sounds like a loaded question, but it's actually not.
Good, I didn't mean it to be.
No, time and again, the scientific adhocracy itself, but I mean, okay, so the bureaucracy that I'm connected with, particularly the Independent Science Board, has said again and again, you will not get the science right. We have been trying to explain that since day one. You will get major chunks of it wrong for various reasons. One is the level of understanding, the second is the rate of change, the third is the unanticipated events, new invasive species, new knowledge, we don't get it right. So the underpinning for science has to be adaptive management. It's a phrase you're all burned out on, but I can't show you where we're doing it. You know, it's like the weather, we talk about it all the time, we don't do anything about it. So that's it. It's the most fundamental. We just wrote about this. The new Independent Science Board reminded the Delta Stewardship Council that what they're imagining is adaptive management may not be along the lines of what we imagine. That is the basis of it. So there's no one thing. It's just the ability to adapt along the way as we incorporate new science and information. Thank you for that question.
What is your role? You specified that at the end there that the scientist provides the answers to help with the decisions.
Yes.
Decisions have got to be based upon the right questions.
Right.
One of the things I have problems with coming out of the scientific community is a lack of willingness to take responsibility for the definition of the question. What is your role in actually defining the questions that we need to ask?
This is a very good question, and we squirm around it because it's a discomforting question for scientists in particular, because we tend to think of ourselves as, oh, we should be detached from that and not responsible for the question itself. But questions like that come from the legislature, like how much water do the fish need? I mean, that makes the scientists crazy when they hear that, because the answer is it depends. You know, I mean, so it really is to scope the question better. So I think, where you're leading, I agree with you. The scientists should take, or at least be more helpful in the formulation of the right question. So when the legislature tells the state board to set up flow prescriptions, okay, when they say to the state board, you've got to set up flow prescriptions, you need scientists to come in and say, you should be careful what you ask for, because if you're doing just flow as the single variable that you're moving in this, you're going to get a funny answer you're probably not going to like, meaning we need all water for fish, as an example. But really, you would scope that question, what would you do with flow in concert with habitat? And what would you need as those two? So this board scoped the problem just like the legislature set it up. So I happen to agree with you. I think or at least the direction I think you're alluding to, is that the scientists could take more part in developing the question. Now, the big problem is, as you know, there's a conflict in there. You know, we start to scope a question that we know the answer to, and you have to be really careful about that. Yeah.
Okay, in the back, question in the back?
There are a bunch up here.
Nobody? Well, I just want those people in the back to be ignored.
Tim Queen's back.
There we go.
Steph, I have a question for you. Do you think that one of the reasons that we don't have that much sound science being used is because there are not many scientists who are interested or trying to communicate their science, therefore the vacuum gets filled up with blogs and everything else?
I used to believe that part of the problem with communication of scientists is we have insufficient numbers of communicators. know if that I believe that anymore. There are a lot of very good scientists who are very good communicators. One of the things that chases them away from this, I know this is true in my own university, is the transaction costs for communicating science are often very high. I mean, I got a death threat last year for something I said. I mean, you get some really interesting, difficult responses. And heck, why would I do that if it's not necessary? But on the other hand, I think actually, and I look around, particularly with my colleagues around me at the Watershed Center and on campus at UC Davis and Stanford and Berkeley, for example, they're terrific communicators there. And it may just be the thing that keeps them out is the transaction costs. And some of us are just born to talk because we like to hear ourselves talk. I wonder who that would be. Met a microphone in the morning.
Yeah, other than adopting the can't beat them, join them approach that you're doing with your blog, what is the answer for the scientific community to stay in the game? Because 24-hour news and blogs and PowerPoint mentality, they're not going away.
Right.
Is it to do what you guys have done through the PPIC and a group of you get together and instead of a PowerPoint presentation report, 50-page report, you put out a 580-page book? Is that the answer? And then try to communicate it to...
Okay, well, yeah, that's the answer for some. Projects like those PPIC projects tend to self-select. Not everybody can stomach spending a year and a half on a project like that. So that is one of the many mechanisms involved in it. On the science side, you have this is why I bring up this notion of scientific adhocracy and how I think it's damaging science. It's chaos at this point. Science and scientists work better in fewer resources, more predictable and steady, so that you can take the long view and be involved in analyses and experiments which take time. Almost all of us who got into the sciences, that's why we got into the sciences. It was for that kind of thing, that kind of inquiry. It wasn't because we liked to make PowerPoint slides. And it certainly wasn't because we liked to make blogs. It was that part of the love of long-term hypothesis testing, empirical science which got involved. So I think restoring some of that to this system would be advantageous. I also think it would bring really high, I have to choose my words very carefully here. I think that we've, in the budget crunch and the chaos, we have really hollowed out some of the technical expertise in our agencies, which is so important. And it's important for the credibility and important for getting things done. So we need to stabilize that as well. So we continue to draw really good talent, good communicators back into the system. We're in a funny time. This is a period of great transition, perhaps a whole lot of peril. Particularly, it isn't just about water. I mean, the science that's used for it, the infrastructure that supports it, the ecosystems that depend on it. So this is part of this very, very complicated mix. Some stability would be nice. Hopelessly naive to think so, but some stability would be nice. And I think that's my last question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.